Hawaiian Applique like this one here, or even that one there, or that one there, or even that one there. It's a really lovely block, and you can make it as simple or as complicated as you like. And it's surprisingly very easy. So how do you go and make it? Well, that's what I'm going to show you in this video, exactly how to make it step by step. So follow along all the way through because I've got top tips every step of the way. Who am I? I am Kim. This is Quilt with Kim. You, my lovely, as normal, are very, very welcome. Let's go find out what you need, first of all, to make your Hawaiian applique. To make our beautiful Hawaiian applique, then we are going to need some stuff. And that stuff begins with some paper. Yes, really, I have not lost the plot, I promise. Okay, what about this paper? There is nothing special about this paper. This is just normal copy paper that you get for your printer. What I would say is get thinner rather than thicker because you are going to need to fold it. I would get yourself a few sheets of it so you can play with your designs to make it simple or complicated. Depends which way you want. Yeah, I know, I can hear you saying, let's go simple, Kim, that's fine, but get a few sheets of that. The size of this, in UK terms, this is A4 size. In the US, I think you can still use A4 because it's just slightly bigger than ours. That's okay. But the legal pad size is about the size that you want. But we're going to turn this into something different. So grab yourself some paper. You're going to need your applique fabric. Whoops. Now, my applique fabric here is this pretty flower one that I've had in my stash. Now, traditionally, Hawaiian applique is based on organic shapes like flowers and fruit and leaves. So if you've got some of that kind of fabric kicking around that you don't know what to do with, turn it into some Hawaiian applique and you might be very pleasantly surprised at what you can do with this. It's also great if you've got layer cakes in your stash, and we've all bought those pre-cut packs that you can get, and layer cakes are the 10-inch squares that you can buy, and you'll have a collection of the fabric that comes when designers design, they design a whole number of fabrics in their collection, and then in a layer cake or indeed a jelly roll or whatever, you'll get pretty much all of those fabrics within that pre-cut pack. So when you get your layer cake, and these are the 10-inch squares, some of them you will be able to use and some of them you now don't know what to do with. Turn them into Hawaiian applique. Great use of them. Okay, so that's my Hawaiian applique. You can use any fabric you like. Obviously, I'm just saying where the tradition comes from that you might want to nudge in that direction. And then you need your background fabric, like this mode of grunge here, that your applique fabric is going to sit on. So you're going to need those two. I'll come back to sizes in a moment. You are going to need, definitely for your applique, you're going to need some fusible web. Now, in other words or other terms, this is called Bonder web. That's the brand name or the main brand name for fusible web, but there are others out there. But you need the fusible web. If you haven't used this before, it is a really thin web-like material, which is actually on the back here. You can't see it at this stage, but when you get it, this feels rough and this feels smooth, and it feels a bit like paper. So it starts off like that, but it doesn't finish like that. But we definitely need this because that's what sticks your applique fabric onto the background fabric. So you're going to need some of that. You are going to need some stabilizer. So this is just stitch and tear stabilizer. You won't need this for the making of your blocks. You will need this at the end when we do our stitching. So don't worry about this for now. This isn't going to stop you making your Hawaiian applique if you want to follow on right now. If you've got some Bonder web, you're pretty much good to go. We can worry about this later, but you will need some of that at some point. Put that to one side. You are going to need some paper scissors. You're going to need a pencil, and you're going to need some fabric scissors. And I would get some big scissors, some strong dressmaking scissors, because we're going to have to do some heavy duty cutting on this one. And that brings me just on to a little tip, and I probably will say it again when we get to that part. If you have joint issues either in your wrist or in your fingers, so you've either got something like arthritis or other type of issues with your fingers, there will be a bit of cutting that's going to be quite difficult for you. So when you get to that stage, I would get somebody else to do that rather than harming the joints in your hand. But don't let that stop you doing the rest of it. It's just the cutting that you might find a bit difficult. Other than that, this is a lovely thing to do. Okay, so having gathered all of that together, let me talk about sizes for a minute, because if we start with our paper, and I'll show you what to do, by the time we've made our designs, you'll find that it fits into very nicely a 10-inch square, and it will be a bit less than that. So these squares here, this particular one is a 10-inch square, same as a layer cake, and this, the background, I just made this 10.5 inches so that I can stitch it into some blocks of the same size. But when you're making a quilt, you'll probably find that especially if you're making a quilt as you go quilt, your blocks will be a particular size, and it depends on the size of your block as to the size of your background fabric. As long as your applique piece fits on this square, you can pretty much have it any size you want depending on the quilt you are making. Okay, if there is a centerpiece to your quilt, you will know what that centerpiece size needs to be, and as long as it's bigger than 8-9 inches, you're pretty much good to go, and you can make this, and you can make your Hawaiian applique to stick in the middle. You will understand more as we go on, but what I'm trying to say is this background piece needs to be the size of the block that fits in with your quilt, whether a centerpiece or quilt as you go. I hope I haven't overcomplicated that. Please put a comment down below if I've made that really, really, really complicated, or you've just got it and I've explained it well. Right, let's move on. We're going to start with our paper, and we're going to make our design. And as I said, we can make this as simple or as complicated as we'd like. So you will need your paper scissors, you will need your pencil, and the first thing that we're going to do with our paper is to make a square. And okay, paper is oblong, so we are simply going to fold one corner up. I'm sure you remember this from school. This is just like making those paper doilies that we made at school to make snowflakes. Okay, so I've put that over to the top, and then I'm going to fold that back on itself, purely because we need to get rid of this little bit here. So if I tear that off, you end up with a square just like that. And if you want a reference, it is about 8 inches a square, that. So you're going to need that to start with, and then we need to fold it and fold it again. So we can just follow this line if you want to make your life easier. So just fold it back into its triangle again, and then fold it in half back again. It's a bit like those things we made when we were at school. You know, remember the fortune teller things? Maybe it's not quite like that. Okay, so fold that in half, and then we want to fold it in half again. Okay, so let me just do that, open it up and just show you again. So we've got our square, fold it in half on the diagonal. So you've got a triangle going on. So our fold is here, our openings are here. You fold up again. So we've now got a fold down here, and we've got the two bits here, but those are folded, those edges are folded. That's our first fold, and then we fold it up again. So we've got a fold down here, so that's where it opens, but it's folded. Can you see there, those edges are folded, and then we've got the full folded edge there. Okay, so what I like to do is keep my edges on my left. That's just so I know that it is always there. I just follow a pattern with it so I know where those edges are. Now get your pencil. I'm going to put a little cross down at the corner, down at the bottom. So this bit we need to leave alone, and that shows you where the center is. And this is where the fun bit starts, is because now we get to design our Hawaiian applique. And as I said, this is based on organic shapes of fruits and flowers and leaves. So this is where we can recreate this. But I've got a few tips for you. So let me show you what to do in essence, and then we'll talk about the tips. So what you're going to do is draw a shape. You can use all of this. And if I just start somewhere along here and I make a swirly shape, something like that. Okay, can you see I've got a little swirly shape like that? And that'll make our design. If you're wondering what on earth I'm speaking about, before I show you what to do next, let me show you how these work out. So I'm going to get one of these clips that every quilter must have because they're really useful. I'm going to keep that together and I'm going to show you a few examples to give you a few little tips. So here's one I prepared earlier, and this is a really simple shape that looks a little bit like an amoeba, I think. Less like, well, it's a bit like a flower, isn't it? Now, this came out of this shape. So this is the one that I've just drawn and shown you. We haven't cut this out yet. I'll show you about that in a minute. I'll show you what to do about that in a minute. But I wanted to show you because when you're drawing these designs, it's really difficult to think about or imagine what they'll look like when you've cut them out, because that is our next stage. But let's not worry about the cutting for a minute. I want to show you what happens when you cut them out and then give you some tips along the way, because that's important when we're designing. Okay, so when this one here is a really simple shape that I've just drawn on here, and you can see where I've come in at the edge there, I've come in almost on a straight line. And the reason for that is when you come in at angles or points, let's just say I came in like that and then went up, you'd have a point here that you'd have to deal with. And this will become clear as we go through. But this one turns into this, and I think if I can get, there we go. If I put that there, you can see here, as I've come in a nice smooth line here, you can see I've got a smooth curve at the bottom of these two lollipop shapes, if you like. I'm not quite sure what to call those. So when we do the stitching, which we have to do ultimately, we need to stitch this down at the edge. And if you've got a nice smooth wide curve here, that'll make it easier for you as a beginner. So going around a curve like this is relatively easy. We've got quite a tight curve here, which you can see on the edge. As I've come round here, this looks like it might be relatively easy, and it probably is, but you can see how that's made a sharper curve, this little dip bit here. So we really need to have a think about when we're drawing that these are wide angles coming straight from the edge, make them bigger, bigger curves, bigger circles than you might otherwise think. So this one will turn into that, and you can see because we folded it, it ends up with all these multiple prongs. Okay, so you don't need to create all of these, all the individual ones. They'll come when we open up this this bit here. So that makes that. So that just, so I'm not getting my words in the, in the right order. I'm sure that sentence made better sense in my head. So that's that one. Let me show you another one. So this is taking it a bit more complicated. And this is what I mean to say that you can go really simple like our amoeba over here, and we can get more complicated depending on how confident you're feeling. And probably the confidence isn't needed quite so much in the sticking of the applique down and creating this bit of applique. The confidence is needed when we need to finish it off, because ultimately we finish it off with a blanket stitch or a satin stitch or a zigzag stitch. And if you're not comfortable in doing that, sorry, confident and comfortable in one word, comfortable. If you're not comfortable in doing that and you're not quite confident in doing that just yet, you might want to aim for the bigger curves and not have the little ones. Sorry, that was the little one. You might aim for the bigger curves and not the little ones, because that'll make it easier for yourself. Okay, so what have I done here? Well, you can see here what I did is actually I copied exactly this design. So it's exactly the same design, but now I put a hole in it. Can you see there that I've put a hole? And of course we create half a hole where we're creating a hole. So if I put that over there we go, you can see how we've created those bubbles at the top. And now because I've created this hole, this circle here, or semicircle, we've created a hole in our piece, because when we've undone it, and if I open that up, you'll be able to see how that is. This is kind of magical. You can see how we've created the holes. But what you can see from this is these holes here. Can you see how I've come in at a bit of a straight there? I've always almost made a C shape rather than a oval shape, and then that'll give us this bit here. You can see the flat bottom there has given us the flat bottom at the bottom of our hole, but can you see up here it's a bit sharper at the top. It's a bit sharper there than it is down here, and you can see on these holes that it's got a flat bottom, which is this bit here, but actually there's a slight little point at the top here. But still, this is quite beginner friendly. You'll be able to go around the edges, and actually going around the holes, there's nothing too worrying about dealing with those holes. Okay, so that's that. And let me show you a bit more complicated. I've got 4 to show you in total, so that was number 2. And I think it's important to show you these so that you can start trying to envisage how it's going to work out. So this is a bit more complicated, this one. And you can see I've created a hole on the edge. I've got a bit more going on in my shape, and I've come round here. So if I put that in, you can see there's where it sits. And then you can see how that begins to create as I open it up. Can you see that? It's clever, isn't it? Now, a few little things on here. We've got a tight, I'll show you on the applique, we've got a tight curve here. So again, if you're not so confident at your satin stitching or blanket stitching, you might not want to have a little narrow area here. But if you are confident in your edge stitching, then absolutely go for it. This is quite a tight curve here, quite a tight oval, but this one's a bit easier. This is nice and easy to go around, but this one is just a bit more of a challenge. So I'm not saying don't do it. It just depends on your confidence level. Okay, so that's that one. So let's put that all together. If I can fold it back up. And then the last one I've got is definitely more intricate again, and I would only attempt this if you are really confident, or you're stitching on the edge with your blanket stitch or satin stitch or whatever. And you can see here this comes from that, and I've created a big old S curve there, which has created almost like a magical lamp hole there, and then a hole here, like a bit out of the edge, and that's given us that little shape there. So that opens up into this shape with our magical lamps of varying sizes. We've got lots here that we need to deal with when we stitch round the edge. So when you're thinking about your initial designs, you want to keep all that in mind and think about, well, when I'm making these curves, am I going to come in at a point, or am I going to come in straight edge at the edge here to give myself a nice easy place to stitch around? So we've got nice big curves here, but this is going to be quite tight coming around this bit here. This is going to be very tight to stitch around. So it really depends on your confidence level. And if you make your swirl and you think, oh, I'm not quite sure about that, this is where multiple pieces of paper comes in, because you can just play around and till you're happy. And if you're still not sure, then we can go on to the next stage and I'll show you what happens and how you can tell. But this is where we want to do the practicing, is on the paper, not on the fabric. So let me take you to the next stage and I'll show you another example, and then we'll get it onto the fabric. Okay, so this is where our paper scissors come in, and what we're simply going to be doing is cutting out along these lines. Now, a couple of other things. We need to be careful when we're doing our design that we don't take off a whole of a fold, because if we drew all the way along there and decided to cut all of that out, it would all fall apart, and we don't want that. So you do need some a folded bit of paper in place so that the paper stays together. So just to start with, just do one single line to make a design, and if you do want a hole, just do one simple hole along the edge like that, but that will be quite tight for your stitching. So let's see how this comes out. I'm going to get my paper scissors and I'm going to simply cut along these lines. And this is what I was referring to, or this is part one of what I was referring to at the beginning. Try not to cut nails, because this is quite hard work if you've got any kind of joint issues. Okay, let's make life easy for myself and do big chunks at a time. You do want to try and keep all these folds in place, like your paper folded in position. If it is moving around, stick a little clip on it, because that'll help it stay in position whilst you're cutting. Let's cut that all the way around, like so. Okay, and then let's come round here. Okay, make sure that's nice and flat. Right, I'm going to cut this hole out. So we're going to see what this hole looks like. We can, of course, if we cut this hole and then we open it up and decide we don't like it, we could just ignore it at the next stage. So don't over worry about it. And I think if you're stuck when you're doing these designs, you think, I don't know, just do one. Just fold it up, do one, cut it and open it out and see what it looks like, because you can make all the mistakes on the paper, can very happily go in the recycling if we don't like it. Okay, so I've cut that and I'm going to open it up to have a little look and see what it's like. I mean, it's promising. Okay, let's move all those scraps out of the way. So can you see there how pretty that looks from that really simple initial design? I'm loving these holes personally. Now, I personally am quite happy doing the stitching around these tight little corners. You may not be. So it is entirely down to you as to how complicated or simple that you want to make it. But you can see what we've got is a nice organic shape that has nudges towards flowers and fruit and leaves and so on. This is definitely an organic, natural, leafy, fruity look. Okay, so there's that. In fact, I like that a lot, so I'm going to stick with that as we go on. But there's another one that I did just earlier, which I haven't particularly turned into anything, but I wanted to show you that this little wave effect is really effective. So you could start with something like that. That's very beginner friendly. But what I want to show quite close up, there's a little bit here because I went in, I drew in, and then I went down and then came round here when I drew, and then I cut that out. And you can see here at the edge, can you see that's gone up a little bit? Let's try and point with my pencil. There's a slight little incline there before we come down. Can you see that? There, let me just try and zoom in a bit so you can see, because I want to show you what happens. There we go, zoomed all the way in. Okay, so there's a slight little, like a top of a house, like a roof. That's what the top of a house is called. I've forgotten all my words. So it looks like a pointy roof. Now, let's see what happens when we open it up. She says, optimistically there is. Therewith. So can you see here? Okay, these fronds look lovely, loving all of those. But can you see this little bit here? We don't like at all, because that is going to be a nightmare to stitch round unless you're really confident. So I don't like that, and I've decided that I want to get rid of it. So I can either smooth across there if I'm okay going around this bit and across and down, or I could fold it all back up and I could simply simply snip that bit off. Let's just show you. Gone. And then as I open it up, we've got a very, very pretty design just there. Can you see? Let's just zoom out again so that you can see it a bit better. There we go. So this is really beginner friendly, this particular shape, and looks really impressive. Very traditional Hawaiian applique, where we've got these fronds going round. And can you see where we've only done the frond to the right, actually it's mirrored itself all the way around. So I'm very happy with that as well. Definitely looks like a palm leaf, so we're good to go on the Hawaiian. But what I'm going to use is this particular one, because I've slightly fallen in love with it. And I am going to pop that back later, because that would be a good demonstration, because I'm teaching my beginner sampler class a bit later today in person. So I will show them that. But how do we turn that into our applique piece? And that's where our fabric comes in. And another piece of equipment that I forgot to say, you're going to need your iron next. So go and set up your iron and ironing board, and I will meet you in the next section. So while my iron is heating up, now I'm doing this on my very temporary ironing mat. I still haven't got a proper ironing pad that I do keep talking about getting. Still haven't got it. Still have my temporary towel. I am doing this on my cutting mat. I'm not doing it directly. I have got a towel here, and I've got lots and lots of insulated wadding in the middle. So please don't do this at home in this particular way. Please do it on your ironing board, because I do not want to be blamed for your cutting mat warping, because there isn't normally any going back. Now, what you want to do at this stage is apply your bonder web or your fusible web to the back of your fabric, the wrong side of your fabric. Now, this fabric, it's actually almost looks like a batik, and it's dyed all the way through. I'm just trying to work out. I don't think either side is particularly darker than the other. Probably this side is the lighter of the two. So what we're going to do is look at our bonder web. So this is wrong side facing up towards you. And on your bonder web, the bonder web is cut to the same size as my applique fabric piece, which, if you remember, is about 10 inches square, and this is a 10-inch square as well to fit nicely on the back of that. If you feel your bonder web or your fusible web, you'll find that there's a rough side, and you'll find that there's a smooth side that's like paper. Your rough side wants to go onto the back of your fabric, okay? And we need to make very sure that it's the smooth side facing up and the rough side facing down. Your rough side is your sticky side. You do not want your iron anywhere near that at all, because once it's on, it's on. Okay, now what I do is get an old tea towel and I will cover that up, because just in case something has happened and it's turned around when I haven't noticed, I would rather my Bonder web, a bit like interfacing, sticks to my tea towel and not to my iron. The ironing board I can live with a little bit, but I don't want things stuck to my iron. So put a tea towel over the top. You do want your iron set in the hottest setting for this to make it stick down, and I would suggest you do this with your proper iron, your full-size iron, not your little travel iron, which I know some of you will have in your sewing room, but actually I have a little iron because I can't fit the camera over my proper iron. Okay, so what I'm going to do, and I'm going to move this around a little bit because I want to make sure that the iron is always going to be on my insulated wadding. So just bear with me whilst I move it around, because I do not want to warp my massive cutting mat. We're going to hold it down for about 8 to 10 seconds in one area. And we're going to move that all the way over our square of fabric that's behind. And you can feel where it is. If you are using a tea towel, you can feel where it is underneath the tea towel, and it's definitely wrinkling. Okay, so I'm going to do all of that and speed this camera up whilst I'm doing it. All right, so grand reveal. That seems to have stuck on okay. I've got a little corner that's caught up just here. Can you see? Yeah, it happens to me too. I'm not going to worry about that because it will cut off, so don't worry. What I'm aiming for is that this is all stuck down. If there's any bits that haven't quite stuck properly, I am going to just run my iron over, hold it for a few seconds to stick that down there. Okay. And I know I said to put a tea towel over. Yes, I did, but I'm very sure that that is in the correct position now. So it's not going to stick to my iron. Don't turn your iron off because you will need it again in a minute. But we need to let that cool down, because as it cools down, it will harden, which is exactly what we want. So whilst mine's cooling down, let's get over to the next section. Ta-da! There we go. Right, that's all cooled down and it feels quite stiff and it's cold and it's all stuck down. Now we want to treat this the same way as our paper, near enough. So turn it over so your fabric is facing you, and then we are going to fold it in the same way. Okay, so let's fold that into a diagonal shape. And then fold it up again. This will be a bit bulkier this time, so don't worry. And if you hear bits of sort of cracking with your Bonder web, don't worry about that. Okay, can you see I've just folded it? So I've folded it in half, fold it in half again, and then my folded point is here, and then I'm folding it up again. So all my folded sides are on one side there. And I'm going to flip that over so the folded sides are on my left. It doesn't really matter where they are, but it does matter that you know where they are. Okay, I'll stick a little clip on it to keep them together. I need my pencil back. Then we want to get our doily shape again, the one that we cut out and we like, and we simply want to fold it back up again into its original fold, which is always quite an interesting exercise. You'll notice I've put a little cross in the corner. I do that to show me where the center is, to go in the center of my folded fabric. So I'm going to put that in position into the corner there. And yes, this bit will be wasted. If you cut it very carefully, you will have a corresponding bit with a hole in the middle, which of course you can use as an opposite, a mirror shape or a relief or whatever. Some artist will tell me what the name is. I am going to carefully draw round my shape with my pencil on my Bonder web. Okay, make sure that you're holding it down so it's in the right place. Okay, so you can see there that I've drawn that around. Let me hold that up a little bit so you can see I've drawn around my little pattern there onto that. And then what we're going to do is get our big scissors, our dressmaking, our fabric scissors this time, and you will need some meaty scissors for this one. Don't use the little ones, you need big ones because there's quite a lot of fabric to go through. And again, if you've got your joint problems or you've got finger joint problems, don't attempt this because it will be quite tough for you. So you need somebody else to do the cutting out, but thereafter you'll be fine and good to go. All right, so now we are going to carefully cut round here, around your line, just like we did on the paper. And I will promise you it's not difficult, but it is a challenge. Go slowly. And I'm sure you know this, but this bit on the scissors here is the easier bit to cut with. You've got more power there and it's more controllable. So I always try and make sure that I'm cutting with that bit of the scissors. Okay, let's come round the corner. In fact, I can't come round the corner, so what I'm going to do is cut all this excess off and then come at it from another angle. I was trying to make it easier for myself as I go along. Okay. Let's cut around here. If it's a bit messy, don't worry so much because you will be able to tidy it up a little bit in a moment when we've got it all cut out. Let's just get this cut off because it does not want to come. There you go. And then that bit, I'm just cutting that from the back because it wasn't coming off. We've got this little fish shape bit that we need to cut here. I'm being very careful not to cut any of the other bit of the design that I want to keep. So this, if you're doing this for kids, I wouldn't say this is very easy for children. This is going to be an adult thing. It's not difficult, it's just a bit challenging. You can see that I'm having to take my time a bit with it. It will put up a little bit of a fight, but you are cutting through lots of layers. I can get rid of that from the back again. And then, we've got around here, so let's move that down there. Having that clip on whilst I'm cutting really helps keep everything in position when I'm cutting through all these layers. Let's come round the corner. Remember here we've got a straight line to make our curve nice and easy for us. Don't be tempted to move up and snip at an angle. You want a nice straight line there. And we've got this hole that we're going to keep in here. So let's come in straight and come round in a nice C shape. Just round there and then back the other way in a, oh! So you can see we've got a C shape on that hole there. It looks a bit jaggedy. Honestly, don't worry about it. It will sort itself out at the next stage. Okay, so let's get all my rubbish off. Right, and take the clip off and open it up and see if there are any areas that we need to tidy up a little bit before we go to the next stage. Doesn't that look pretty? As I look around, there's a couple of little bits. So there's a smooth bit here. Sorry, that's not a smooth bit, a jaggedy bit here that I probably just want to smooth off a little bit. It's only on one of them. This bit's a bit jagged here. Can you see on this edge? It's just a little bit jagged, so I'm just going to smooth it off a teensy wincy bit. Once it's stuck down, so that's a bit better, and weave stitch around the edge, a lot of these things disappear, but you want to make sure that everything is smooth. There's a little bit here, can you see, just there, that looks a bit like a broken nail. So we're going to tidy that bit up because we don't want that like that. So this is where the points of our scissors come into their own, and you want to make sure that you've always got scissors that are sharp to the tips. Okay, so anywhere else that's looking a bit dodge, there's a bit there that I probably need to smooth off. Okay, I think that's all good to go. All right, so if I'm happy with that and I've just smoothed it off a little, oh, there's another little bit, another little bit that I'll sort that out off camera. So having done all of that and tidied that up, I am going to sort that bit out. We need to get back to our ironing board, but this time we need that background fabric that this is going to go on. Doesn't that look superb? Right, okay, so let's meet back at the ironing board and get this all stuck down. That was very well timed, because as I stopped the camera to get ready for this bit, Nige came in with a cup of tea. So cheers, and thanks Nige if you're watching this. Okay, so to stick this down onto that, so this is our backing square that we've got ready in the size that we need, whatever size that your quilt asks for or whatever you have decided. The first thing that we need to do is make sure that this goes in the middle. How do we do that? We simply have this with the right side facing up, okay, because we want to stick our applique on the surface of this, and then we are going to fold it in half to make a rectangle, fold it in half again, and we're going to just finger press just this little corner here. You don't need to go all the way along, just this little corner here, because that'll find us our center of our square. Having found that, now on here, on your piece that you've been, your fabric doily Hawaiian Applique piece, we've already got the center folded in from our folds. So what we will be doing is carefully matching our fold lines on our applique to the fold lines on our backing, and make sure it is in position. Okay, so that's what we'll be doing. But first we have to take the backing off here. How do we do that? Well, we get ourselves a pin or an old needle, as I've just grabbed, and we're going to score it. Let me do that again. We are just going to score it. You may not be able to see that. You're just scratching the surface, and as I scratch the surface and knock everything in existence, if we then break that, she says optimistically, let's find where I have scratched the surface. Do you know, some things just don't happen. There we go. Don't happen when you want them to. So I've scratched the surface, and now I'm going to tear all this backing away. And what will be left on the fabric, the back of the fabric, is the sticky bit. And as you feel it, you can feel that it's a bit plasticky and slightly sticky. And that's what you want. So this bit of paper, that was the smooth bit on your bonder web. You know, the bit I said feels like paper, that's this bit, but we don't want that anymore. So if you were lucky, when I did all those other samples and I was taking these off and they were coming off in one piece and looking really pretty, but this one evidently isn't. So it's obviously stuck down really well. Let's get all that off. Make sure it's all off. You can't do anything with that at all, so that can go in the bin. This is your last chance as well. If you've got any snuggy bits around the edges that you want to trim off or just look a bit dodgy, now is your time to get rid of them, because after now you won't be able to do it. I'm not sure that's very good English, but I think you know what I am trying to say. That looks okay. Let's get all the bits off there. So we've got our folds. We can see our folds in the center of our applique piece here, and we want to spend a few minutes getting it into the position we want and the direction we want. So at the moment I've got these sort of horn shaped prongs going to the corners. What I might want is it going sort of up and down on my block there. There is no right or wrong to this. You do this as you want. It is really your own design. And with all the years, look, there's another one there. With all the years that I've been teaching this, every one of my students comes up with something different. So it really will be very unique. Unless you're following a pattern in a book, if you're making up your own, you can guarantee it will be unique to you. So I don't know whether I like that or I think I like those prongs going to the four corners. So I think I like that direction. So I'm going to spend a couple of moments making sure that I'm all lined up on those center folds. Can you see here? There's that one of those little folds that I've just made and a fold on my applique, and I can line those folds up at both edges, and again top and bottom, and I already know my middles, my centers are matching up. Okay, so if I'm happy with that, something is underneath. I think there's a clip underneath, that's what's underneath. If I am happy with that, then I am ready to stick that down. So we're going to get our iron again. And again, I'm going to hold it down for about 10 seconds, 8 to 10 seconds in one place. And we're going to do that all over our applique. And what you want to do is press, you're not ironing. So we're not going backwards and forwards, we're pressing, because what we're doing is making the glue that's underneath on that web is to melt, stick down to our backing fabric so that the whole thing sticks down. Let me just move that up because I don't want to go onto my cutting mat. Okay, we're nearly there. Don't forget the middle as well. It's very easy to concentrate on all the edges and then forget that the middle needs sticking down. Now what I like to do for good measure is just turn that over, and then I can give it a good press from the other side. Got bits of towel on there as well. Can you see? Okay. I don't really want all the iron shapes. This is why, can you see all these iron shapes, which look quite pretty, but it's not the look that I'm after. When you do this with your big iron, you won't get all those little shapes because the size of the base on your iron will cover quite a lot, but I don't think you can see it that side really. And if I put this under my proper iron, then we won't have that problem. Okay, so let's talk about what we need to do next. There we have our beautiful Hawaiian applique in place, all ready for the next stage. So we're not quite finished yet, but that is stuck on and that'll be fine from there on in. But what do we do next? Now, what we have to do next is stitch round the edges. And that if it is going off to be quilted, you need to do the stitching of the edges before you put your wadding or your fusible fleece or whatever is going on the back of your quilt. We need to do the stitching first before we move to the quilting, the layering and the quilting stage. So how to do that, I'm not going to show you in this video because it's a whole video on itself. And what I wanted for this video is to make sure that you knew how to make the Hawaiian applique itself. And then if you know how to do the stitching around the edge with a satin stitch or blanket stitch, then you can go and do that. But if you're new to all of that, then I'll cover that in the next video. But we do need to cover off one thing before we do that for everybody, which is you're going to need stabilizer. And this is just a stitch and tear stabilizer. It is as cheap as chips. I've spoken about it before in videos. I probably need to do a whole video on it on itself. But all we do is cut a piece of stabilizer that's about the same size as your block and have that underneath when we are stitching round the edge, because your machine won't your machine won't want to be stitching around these edges without something underneath to, well, stabilize your fabric to keep it in place so it can do all its fancy stitching. Okay. But I thought I'd pop in very quickly just before I finish off to show you what happens when you've finished and what it will end up looking like. So this is my teaching block that I popped up right at the beginning in the intro, and you can see that I've got a blanket stitch all the way round the edges and of the holes as well. So I did that before I layered it and I quilted it, and we've got a really pretty quilting on that white fabric in the background here. You'll probably also find cat hairs on this because Shadow sneaks up and lays on it if it's out and about. I don't know why he's attracted to this one, but I've got there's contour quilting around the edge, and I've done a bit of free motion, a pretty free motion flower in the middle there. Okay, so your order is you stitch the edges with your stabilizer, then you layer, then you quilt, and then you can finish whatever needs to happen next in your quilt. So if you're very happy doing the edge stitching and doing a decorative stitch around the edges, put the stabilizer underneath your applique piece and stitch away, and then you can layer it up ready for quilting. If you are completely new to this and you've never done any decorative stitching around the edge of applique, then that is what is going to be covering up over there in the next video. If it's not popping up just yet, it means I haven't recorded it, because it will be the one I'm videoing after this. But I know there have been some people waiting for this tutorial, so I wanted to get on and show this. But if you're new, follow the next video coming up. But I hope that has helped open up your world to this beautiful art of Hawaiian applique. Do have fun with it because it is so beautiful, and actually once you've got into it, it is really very, very easy. And as I said, you can make your designs as simple or as intricate as you like, and you will impress everybody no matter which stage you're at with it. So all that remains to say is, if you've enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that notification bell, and I will love you and leave you for now, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.